Some things seem like coincidences, but when you look closer, you realize it was destiny dressed as chance. And it was in a tiny corner market, filled with the smell of warm bread and a struggling air conditioner, that a story began. One so wild, even afternoon soap operas wouldn't dare write it. "Miss, could you help me with this bag?" he asked, voice tired but still firm. The girl turned, a bit suspicious. And who wouldn't be? An older man in an expensive suit, white hair perfectly combed, a Rolex on his wrist, asking for help with a bag of rice and beans? But she helped, and in that small, simple, almost automatic gesture, the past decided to show its face. "Is your name Otávio?" she asked, still holding the bag, eyes fixed on him. He froze. The supermarket went dead silent for a couple of seconds. Even the popsicle freezer seemed to stop beeping. "I am..." "Why?" She bit her lip. Almost didn't say it, but she did. "I think you're my father." "Yeah, I know, sounds like a lie. But I was there. Well, not exactly. But I know this story like the back of my hand." Otávio Fontes, 71 years old, widowed for 3 years, owned half the bakeries in town, and a heart full of debt with the past. And on the other side, a young woman named Isadora, 25, wavy hair, the look of someone who grew up too fast, and a name she'd carried since birth. But before you think this is just another family reunion story, hold on to your feelings, because what this girl knew could change everything. Not just his life, but the truth he thought he knew. Because sometimes, what we lost back then wasn't forgotten. It was hidden, and worse. Sometimes it was hidden by the person we trusted most. Otávio didn't say a word for a long second, just looked at her like someone trying to piece together a 1,000-piece puzzle while blindfolded. "Wait, your mother was... who?" "Lucia, the woman who worked in your house, back in 1998. It felt like the ground disappeared beneath his feet. Lucia. The name hit him like a punch. A black and white memory, a laugh in the kitchen, a forbidden gaze. But Lucia had left, vanished without a word, or at least that's what they told him. And suddenly, old Otávio's stomach twisted, because if that were true, someone who's been dead a long time had a lot to answer for. "Your mother told you that?" "No, she never did. I found out recently after she died." The word "died" hit him like a punch to the chest. But there was more, a lot more. "And how can you be sure?" he asked, his voice trembling. Isadora took a deep breath, pulled an envelope from her purse, crumpled, old. "Because I found this, hidden inside the lining of her wedding dress. And that, my friend, is where the ground cracked for good, because inside that envelope was his handwriting. Otávio's handwriting from 25 years ago, a note he didn't remember writing, but he had written it. And what was written there could destroy a reputation, a family, and a lie that had lasted 2 decades. But that, I'll tell you in the next chapter, because now is the time to take a deep breath, because some stories start with a grocery bag and end with the world turned upside down. Lucia, a simple name, like so many others. But to Otávio, that name sounded like an old thunder rumbling back in the middle of the afternoon. He felt his chest burn. It wasn't heat, it was memory. Lucia was much more than the housemaid. She was a breeze in a suffocating marriage. She was a smile when his wife no longer smiled. She was a shoulder when all he heard was pressure. And she left without saying goodbye. At least, that's what he believed for 25 years. "Did she ever tell you anything?" "About me?" he asked, staring at Isadora like he was speaking to a ghost. "Never. She always said my father was a mistake, and that it wasn't worth knowing who he was." Otávio swallowed hard, because he didn't remember ever being a mistake. Yes, Lucia had vanished, but he remembered writing to her, telling her he would leave everything behind, that he'd take care of her. And now, standing there at the market's door, he held that yellowed envelope in his own handwriting. "You can open it if you want," she said. He opened it. His hands were trembling. The plastic bag fell to the floor without him noticing. Inside, a piece of paper folded 4 times. He unfolded it, And there it was, his handwriting, yes, but the content was something else entirely. Lucia, disappear. Leave, and don't come back. Forget what happened. I don't want to see you again. And never tell anyone. This child isn't mine. Otávio. Silence, a thick, cold silence that even the sound of shopping carts seemed to respect. I never wrote this, he whispered, but it's your handwriting. Otávio stared at that letter like it was a broken mirror. It was his handwriting, yes, his writing style, even the usual accent mistakes he always made. But that, he knew, deep down, he never said those words. And then it hit him. Because Otávio wasn't dumb. He'd lived long enough to know the world is full of invisible hands, and where there's inheritance, there's deception. Where there's a big name, there are small people behind it. Did you know she left out of nowhere? He asked. She told me she worked in a rich house, and that one day her boss told her to leave without explanation. Otávio closed his eyes. Back then he was just about to confess everything to his wife, but before he found the courage, Lucia vanished. And now, standing in front of the daughter he never knew he had, he started to understand. Someone did this. Someone tampered with this letter, or wrote it in my name, or stole the original, she completed. Otávio sat on the bench at the bus stop, right there on the sidewalk. The ground spun. His memory tightened, because there was one person, just one, who had access to the house, to his office, to his documents, and to the whole story. Someone who swore loyalty, but always had a vested interest in keeping things just the way they were, and that someone was his own brother, his business partner, his confidant. My uncle, Isadora asked, barely breathing. Otávio didn't answer, just stared into the distance, as if watching the past, trying to sneak out through the back door of his memory. But now it was too late, because the past was back, and this time it had a name, a face, and a letter. What Otávio didn't know yet was that the letter was just the beginning. What Isadora found in her mother's closet was far more serious. And in the next chapter, I'll tell you what was hidden inside that shoebox under the bed. But prepare yourself, because some things we think die with the person, but the truth always finds a way to come back. What would you do if an old box under the bed revealed that everything you lived was only half the story? That's what happened to Isadora. 3 weeks before that encounter at the market, she buried her mother. The funeral was simple, few people, a lot of muffled crying. That silent kind of loneliness only those who've lost their mother understand. After everyone had left, she stayed there, sitting at the edge of the bed. The house smelled of bar soap, and the afternoon sun streamed through the window, hitting the patched quilt, and it was in that silence that she saw the corner of the box under the bed, an old shoebox. The kind they don't even sell anymore. The lid half torn, the smell of mold and memory. She pulled it out. Inside, letters, photos, a scapular, a baby bracelet, and a crumpled envelope with the name Otávio Fontes scribbled across it. My father, she whispered, barely believing it. That's when her world started to shift, because everything her mother used to say about not wanting to know who her father was, not worth it, now seemed to hide something else, not contempt, but protection. At the bottom of the box, a blue plastic folder well hidden. Inside, yellow documents, old certificates, and a paper that looked important, notarized, dated 1999. It was a will, made by Otávio Fontes, naming as beneficiary someone named Isadora de Souza. But how? If she was never officially recognized, if she never had contact, what did it mean? She took everything, told no one, not her friends, not her boyfriend who always tried to rescue her from poverty, as if love were a bill. She kept the documents, read every line, studied the names, and there in the footer a signature, Claudio Fontes, Otávio's brother, signed as a witness, which meant he knew from the beginning. And if he knew, why did he let the girl grow up without a father, with nothing? Exactly. Some brothers are like blood, others A poison. Back to the present. Otávio looked at the envelope like he'd swallowed a stone. She kept this her whole life? Hidden. Never showed it. But it was there, with the birth certificate and a photo of you two. What photo? She pulled a folded photo from her pocket. Otávio recognized it instantly, a younger version of himself, shirt unbuttoned, smiling, and Lucia leaning against him, smiling too. But the photo was torn. A piece was missing. I found it like this. Otávio held the picture gently, as if holding a piece of his own soul. This was taken at the farmhouse, in '98. My brother, he was the only one who knew I was there with her. Isadora said nothing, but her look said it all. Suspicion, hurt, hunger for the truth. Then the realization hit. The will. You said you have a will. She nodded, taking the paper from her bag carefully. Otávio read it, line by line. It was his signature, but there was a problem. He never made that document. At least, not like that. Was it real, forged, or a draft someone took before he had it registered? And then, my friend, the floor gave out, because if that document existed and Claudio had witnessed it, it meant his brother knew about the daughter, the affair, the inheritance, and everything Otávio wanted to hide out of fear, shame, or cowardice. But worse than knowing, he covered it up, and maybe even sabotaged everything. Yet Otávio still didn't know the worst, because Isadora hadn't yet told him the most delicate part of the story, the part involving a blood test, an anonymous phone call, and a woman named Helena. But that, my friend, I'll tell you in the next chapter, because once the truth starts coming out of the closet, no one can shove it back in. Otávio was still holding the will like someone clutching a grenade with no pin. The paper trembled in his hand, but it wasn't just age, it was the weight of what it meant. Because if all of this was true, he didn't just have a daughter, he had a daughter he'd nearly erased from existence. And worse, someone he loved like a brother had done the erasing for him. But there was still more, things that hadn't yet come to light, and Isadora, she knew that. There's one more thing, Mr. Otávio, she said, her voice slightly cracking. More? There's a woman, Helena. She contacted me a few days ago. Otávio frowned. The name didn't ring any bells. Helena. She said she worked for your family for years, that she was friends with my mother, and that she overheard a conversation between her and your brother, a conversation where he threatened her, told her to disappear from your life. Then Otávio's eyes widened. Helena. Of course. The cook. My God, Helena. The woman who made cheese bread like his mother's, who laughed loudly, who sang old sertanejo songs while frying steak. He hadn't seen Helena since Claudio's wedding, 20 years ago. She called me out of the blue, said she waited for my mother to die before telling the truth. She'd been afraid for too long, and the only thing she had was an envelope with a blood test. Otávio already knew where this was going, but he let her speak. DNA test between you and my mother, done in 1999, and it was positive. Silence. The kind of silence that has a sound of its own. But why didn't I receive it? Why didn't anyone bring it to me? Because the lab was paid in cash, and the retrieval contact was one person only, Claudio. And that's when old Otávio started to shake, because the truth began to take shape. His brother had forged a letter, erased the existence of his daughter, possibly altered documents, and now there was a DNA test he personally picked up and made disappear. As they say, the ones who protect the family name too much are usually the ones who've already stained it. Otávio stood up, walked to the curb. The city traffic seemed mute compared to the noise roaring inside his head. Do you have that test? She nodded. Pulled a laminated sheet from her bag. He looked, confirmed the data, the expert's signature. It was real. It was him. And why now? Why did you come looking for me now? Her answer was simpler than he expected. Because I'm pregnant. The old man nearly collapsed onto the sidewalk. Pregnant? She nodded. And I don't want my child to grow up like I did, without history, without knowing who they are, without truth. Otávio swallowed hard. Right there. in the girl he had just met, already beat the heart of his grandchild, and he didn't even know their name. Who's the father? A mistake, but this isn't about him. It's about me, and about you. I just want to know if I have the right to carry this name, without carrying the shame too. And that's when the old man felt it, the guilt, the rage, and a powerful urge to go back in time and punch his own brother in the face. But time doesn't go back. What comes back is the truth, and it comes back thirsty. But listen, if you think Claudio is just a behind-the-scenes villain, brace yourself for what's coming, because in the next chapter, he shows up. And the reunion between the brothers will have everything except a hug. Otávio didn't sleep that night. He tossed and turned in that enormous bed, empty since Teresa passed. The woman he shared 42 years with, 2 legitimate children, a picture-perfect marriage, and not a single honest confession. The ceiling fan creaked. The clock read 5:12 a.m. And he was already up, shirt buttoned to the top, shoes polished, and a leather briefcase in hand. Inside the briefcase, the letter, the old will, the DNA test copy, and a folded photo, because now he didn't just want the truth. He wanted confrontation. He wanted to look his brother in the eyes and ask, in no uncertain terms, why? Claudio lived in a gated community, the kind with more security than a presidential hospital. But Otávio didn't call ahead. He just showed up, parked right in front of the garage, and rang the bell like he was shoving the past down someone's throat. Claudio opened the door in linen shorts, coffee in hand, wearing that half-smile he always wore. Well, well, the ghost shows up. Otávio didn't respond. He walked straight in, went to the living room, sat on the leather couch, and placed the briefcase on the coffee table. We're going to talk about 1999. Claudio smiled again, but now the smile wasn't friendly. It was calculated, like someone playing chess with his eyes. This about the letter? This is about my daughter. Claudio froze for half a second, but recovered quickly, swallowed the shock like poison disguised as wine. Oh, so the little bastard showed up. Otávio stood up. The slap landed hard, clean, across his brother's face. Claudio staggered but didn't hit back. He just wiped his mouth with his shirt sleeve and smirked again. There, feel better now? Otávio was breathing heavily, rage climbing up through his chest like fever. You forged a letter. You buried a DNA test. You lied to me for 25 years. I saved your life, Otávio, your reputation, your company, your marriage. You destroyed someone else's. She would have destroyed you first. Claudio shouted back, louder now. You were a married man, newspaper-worthy name, charity foundation. You were ready to throw it all away for a sweet-voiced housemaid with a slim waist. Wake up, Otávio. The world doesn't accept stories that are too beautiful. Otávio trembled, but not with doubt, with disgust. She was the mother of my child, and you made me believe she abandoned me. You made me believe I was a pathetic old fool who mistook affection for love. Claudio poured more coffee, sat calmly, crossed his legs. You were too weak to make the decision, so I made it for you. And now you'll pay for it. Claudio laughed, that same crooked smirk, the kind of laugh that comes with hidden cards. You'll report me over an expired will? A letter with no forensic proof? A DNA test nobody can verify because the lab went bankrupt? Otávio said nothing. He knew it would be his word against his brother's. You're good at dirty games, Claudio. I've always been better than you at the real ones. Otávio grabbed the briefcase, stood up. But you know the difference between us? What? You built everything to seem honest. I'm ready to lose it all, to be honest. And he left. Left his brother sitting there, coffee cooling, and that smug smile slowly fading. Out on the sidewalk, Otávio took a deep breath. The rising sun hit him full in the face, and for a moment he felt clean, maybe dirty on the outside, but clean on the inside, because finally he had faced the monster. What he didn't know yet was that the monster had a plan B too, and someone very close to him was already being used as a pawn on that board. But that, I'll tell you in the next chapter. Because now, my friend, the lie starts getting names, addresses, and a very high price. After the slap across his brother's face and the truths hurled like thorns, Otávio returned home. But he wasn't the same man anymore. That wealthy old man who used to hide behind expensive wines, newspaper columns, and boardroom speeches was now just a father, late, confused, with a heart broken by a door he himself had locked 25 years ago. He walked into the house. The mansion suddenly felt too big for just one person. The ticking of the wall clock mocked the urgency he never had. The living room, still lined with family photos, looked like a parade of fake smiles. Him, Teresa, the official children. No trace of Isadora, no memory of the woman he truly loved, no shadow of the daughter the whole world had hidden from him. But in the back of the kitchen, held up by a fridge magnet, there it was, the only real photo in that house. Lucia smiling, holding a banana pie. Otávio stopped, stared at that image, like if he looked long enough, time might rewind. He remembered taking that picture himself on some random day. He remembered. It was late afternoon. She was laughing at some dumb joke he made. Teresa was traveling. The kids were at school. That day, he almost told her he loved her. Almost. But almost is cowardice's favorite verb. And because of that almost, life turned out the way it did. He picked up the phone. Called Isadora. It rang 3 times. Nothing. Called again. Voicemail. 1 more time. Still nothing. Then his chest tightened. That kind of tightness only someone who's lost someone again knows too well. He ran to the car, drove to her neighborhood. That simple street, chipped walls, scent of home-cooked food in the air. Knocked on the door. No answer. Neighbors said she'd left the day before, with a suitcase. In a rush. She left? He asked a woman in a floral blouse sweeping the sidewalk. She said she needed to disappear for a while. Her eyes were swollen, looked like she'd cried for hours. Otávio felt the ground vanish beneath him. For a second he thought she'd given up, that the pain was too much. But then, the neighbor added, "She left a note if you want to see it." He entered. The house was modest, smelled of lavender and an extinguished candle. The woman handed him the note, firm handwriting, but shaky. "I need to breathe. Find out who I am before someone tells me who I should be. If he wants to find me, tell him not to send a lawyer. Find me, like a father should. Isadora." Otávio walked out without saying a word. His heart was an old suitcase, full of unresolved things. But now he knew, either he found that girl, or he'd die with Lucia's photo on the fridge, and guilt in his eyes. That night, no wine, no newspaper, no TV, just silence, and the sound of the past pounding on the door, hard. But there was more, because while Otávio wept quietly on the porch, a black car stopped discreetly on the side street, and inside, Claudio, on the phone. "She's gone? Good. Now the old man's alone, ready to sign anything." Yeah, the game wasn't over yet, and Claudio still had one last card up his sleeve. But he forgot one thing. A wounded father is dangerous, but a repentant father is unstoppable. In the next chapter, the search begins, and the reunion may come with a hug or with a coffin. 2 days. That's how long Otávio spent searching for Isadora without success. 2 days without sleeping properly, without eating, without thinking about anything else but one question. Where did she hide to get away from me, if all I want is to find her? He drove through neighborhoods called hospitals, scoured social media, reached out to lawyers, but no one knew anything. Until on the 3rd day, early in the morning, he got a call. Unknown number. "Mr. Otávio?" "Yes, this is Helena. I was, or used to be, a friend of Lucia. I know where Isadora is." Otávio straightened in his chair like he'd been struck by lightning. "Is she okay?" "She is, but she isn't. She's in a quiet place, trying to understand the world. She's hurting and scared, but I can take you to her. Please, right now." The car pulled up in front of a small church, far from the city center. The kind with an iron bell, the scent of melted wax and wooden benches that hurt your back. But inside, lived a peace no big city could sell. Helena pointed. There! Isadora was sitting in the second row, head bowed, eyes red. She wore a loose blouse, hair tied up any old way, hands resting on the belly that wasn't showing yet. Otávio entered quietly. His footsteps echoed on the cold floor. Each step, a wordless apology. He stopped 2 meters away from her, said nothing, just waited for her to feel his presence, and she did, turned slowly. Their eyes met. There was no soap opera scene, no dramatic crying, no cinematic hug, but there was something stronger. There was silence and acceptance. She whispered, barely audible, "You really came." "I did, and I'm not going anywhere." She took a deep breath. Her eyes welled up, but not a single tear fell. "I thought you were going to do what you always did, run away." This time I ran from myself to get to you." She lowered her head, touched her belly. Otávio sat beside her, slowly, as if afraid to scare away a fragile hope. "You're going to be a grandfather." He swallowed his sob. "And you are going to be everything I never had the courage to be, a mother, whole, strong." They stayed in silence. The sunlight began filtering through the cracks in the ceiling, and in that moment, without a word spoken, forgiveness began to bloom, gently, like walking barefoot on cracked ground. Before leaving, Isadora said, "I don't want your money." Otávio replied, "I don't want to give you an inheritance. I want to give you a story." And that hurt, beautifully. At the exit, Helena handed Otávio an envelope. "There's something you need to see. It's about Claudio, and about your wife's will, the real one." Otávio frowned. "Teresa?" Helena nodded. "She knew everything, and she left it all hidden. But not in the way you think. Yeah, my friend, because sometimes the truth is where you least expect it, and the person you thought was made of stone was trying to be a bridge all along. But that, I'll tell you in the next chapter, because now the game changes, and the real will might change everything again." Otávio returned home with the envelope in his hands and his heart in pieces. He was an old man, tired, but with a new fire burning inside him. Justice, justice for Lucia, for Isadora, and now for Teresa. Because inside that envelope, Helena said, was a will, a second will, one he had never seen. He sat at the old mahogany desk in the room that now felt more like a museum of regrets and opened it carefully. The paper was well preserved, folded with care. First page, Private Will of Teresa Machado Fontes. Date, 2 months before her death. Otávio read slowly. Each line felt like a punch, a whisper, a shattered mirror. "If you're reading this, Otávio, it means Claudio has failed, and you finally found the courage to look back." Her handwriting was firm, elegant, as always. "I always knew about Lucia, not because of gossip, but because of silence, because of your scent when you returned from the farmhouse, because of the lightness only a man in love carries. I don't blame you. I understand you." Otávio paused. His eyes trembled. Teresa always knew, always kept quiet, and even so, stayed by his side. "My God," he whispered. He returned to the letter. "What I don't understand is how you allowed your brother to make decisions for you. He stole our story. He divided us more than your betrayal did. He knew everything and made me swear silence, for honor, for reputation. But in the end, it was just for greed." Otávio closed his eyes. His throat burned. The woman he thought he had betrayed had been complicit in the silence to protect him, but it didn't end there. "Isadora is your daughter. I saw the photo, read the note. I know the truth, and I left everything ready with my lawyer. If Claudio tries to make this document disappear, know this. There's a copy with Dr. Ruth Fernandez. She knows what to do, and I left my final wish on record. I want the Fontes Foundation to be divided among your children, all of them, including Isadora." Otávio buried his face in his hands. Teresa, the woman he had betrayed, had been nobler than he ever imagined. She had left the door open while he spent a lifetime locking windows. On the final page, there was a letter, not a legal document, A letter from a woman to a man. Otávio. Maybe love isn't what we feel. Maybe it's what we endure in silence. I loved you the best I could, and even when I didn't understand you, I never hated you. I only pitied you for being a whole man, living only half a life. Otávio cried. Not a pretty cry, an ugly one. Nose running, breath catching, hands gripping the letter like trying to hug what was no longer there, because in that moment he understood. The past doesn't forgive cowards, but sometimes it gives a second chance to those willing to face the pain. At the bottom of the letter, a postscript. Claudio isn't working alone. There's someone inside the foundation helping him. Someone close. Closer than you think. And just like that, Otávio's heart raced, because he knew exactly who she was talking about. But that I'll tell you in the next chapter, because when betrayal comes from inside the house, it means the poison's been served on the family's finest plate. Betrayal, my friend, rarely comes with a knife. It comes quietly, with a soft voice, a pressed shirt, and a name tag that says, "Someone you trust." Otávio had always had a right hand at the Fontes Foundation. A discreet, efficient man, the kind who remembers employees' birthdays, brews coffee when the cleaning lady calls in sick, and uses fancy words like ethics and transparency. His name? Marcio, 38 years old, in-house lawyer at the foundation, a former intern who, over 2 decades, had become Otávio's shadow. But Teresa, even from beyond the grave, didn't leave loose ends. At the bottom of her will, there was a small note. Check-in box, confidential folder, recording 0407. Otávio went to his office, sat in front of the computer, which hadn't been turned on in weeks. The login was still the same. Founder 2020, he typed, logged in. Confidential folder. There it was. An email with an audio attachment. Heart-pounding. He hit play. Claudio, he's weaker than ever. We can push the merger until August. He'll sign. I've already spoken to the folks at the notary office. Everything's set. We just need to keep Isadora away from him a little longer. If she finds the clause, the foundation's done. Otávio paused the audio. The voice was unmistakable. Marcio. The same man who patted him on the back every day. The same man who smiled as he handed over reports. The same man who had carried Teresa's coffin and cried at the memorial. It was him, speaking to Claudio, setting up a merger, hiding a clause, lying about his daughter. You bastard, Otávio muttered, eyes burning. He opened the next folder, personal documents, and there it was. The contract for the merger of the foundation with an international group, a hidden clause, written in fine print, buried in the middle of an appendix. The absence of direct heirs of the founder implies full transfer of the institution to holding group BFR, meaning if Isadora showed up, the contract was void. That's why Claudio made everything disappear. That's why Marcio helped. That's why the urgency, the silence, the manipulation. Otávio stood up, grabbed his phone, called the family's old accountant. I need an urgent forensic audit, and I want to trace every contract signed over the last 3 months. On the other end, silence. Are you sure, sir? Yes. Now it's personal. The next day, Otávio went to the foundation, unannounced. Marcio greeted him with a professional smile. Mr. Otávio, didn't expect to see you so early today. Otávio didn't reply. He simply pulled out his phone, played the audio, and stared into Marcio's eyes as his own voice echoed through the room. Marcio froze. This is out of context. Otávio stepped closer. I don't care about context. I care about character. Marcio tried to compose himself. I can explain. You can. To the judge. Otávio replied, pulling an envelope from his jacket. Temporary suspension order. Signed by a family friend who was also a judge. Marcio was escorted out. Claudio, still missing. But for the first time in years, the foundation was in the hands of its true owner again, and he knew exactly what to do with it. Just one thing was missing, finding Isadora again. Because now, she was the rightful heir, not just of wealth, but of a legacy. And this story, was about to begin anew. In the next chapter, the rebuilding begins. But before that, the visit Otávio makes to Lucia's grave will show that true love may die, but guilt stays alive forever. The morning dawned cold, even with the sun shining high in the sky. It was as if the weather respected what was about to happen. Otávio got up slowly, put on a dark suit, old, the same one he'd worn to Teresa's funeral. But today wasn't a day for burying anyone. It was a day to ask forgiveness from someone who could no longer answer. The cemetery was in the northern part of town, small, surrounded by twisted trees and old graves. Lucia's tomb was simple, a white marble headstone. No picture, no flourishes, just her name, her birth date, and one discreet phrase: she loved in silence. Otávio stood there in front of it, alone. He took off his hat, ran his hand over his face, took a deep breath, and began to speak, like someone confessing to the wind. You could have screamed, cursed me, hated me, but no, you chose to disappear, and left me with a hole I only now understand. He looked at the cold stone, but his eyes saw something else. He remembered her laugh in the kitchen, the way she wiped sweat from her forehead with the back of her hand, the last time she touched his hand and said, "We'll never be able to, right?" And he replied, "We already are." A lie. They weren't. They never were. Because he didn't have the courage. He didn't leave his wife, didn't confront his brother, didn't go after her. He stayed, like so many men stay, out of comfort. I found out everything, Lucia. The letter, the test, the daughter, the brother you should have hated but instead stayed silent about, the woman I thought didn't know. She knew everything. And me, I was the only blind one in this whole story. He kneeled, placed a flower at the base of the tomb, a white flower, plastic, one he'd kept since 1999 without knowing why. Isadora, she's more like you than like me. She has your strength, your fierceness, and your loneliness too. He cried, but not that dramatic kind of crying. He cried the way only men who've made too many mistakes cry, slowly and too late. I wish you could see her, the way she walks, talks, looks at me. It's like you came back in flesh and bone, just to remind me of who I was. A grey-haired man approached, simple clothes. It was the groundskeeper. "Did you know Miss Lucia?" he asked. Otávio wiped his eyes. "I loved her." The man nodded. "She came here every month, sat on that very bench, just stared at the graves, and used to say, 'One day he'll come, even if it's after the world ends.'" Otávio smiled sadly. She always knew he would come someday, even if too late. On his way out, he passed by an old tree at the center of the cemetery, tied around its trunk a blue ribbon with a name handwritten, Isadora. It was the name Lucia had chosen and left hanging there, as a promise, as a sign. Otávio took the ribbon, put it in his pocket, and there made a new vow. "I can't love you anymore, Lucia, but I can love what you left behind for me." And he turned away, with eyes full of tears and a heart finally full of truth. But what he didn't imagine is that the grandchild he hoped for so much might never be born. Otávio came back from the cemetery with something in his chest he hadn't felt in years: peace and purpose. It was as if, after so many lies, so much hiding, so much running, he finally had something true to hold on to. Not wealth, not a position, not prestige, a daughter, a grandchild, and this time he wanted to get it right. He wanted to be present, to pay the debts of the heart, to be a real grandfather, not just in name. In the following days, he and Isadora saw each other again. At first, things were tense, distant. She always looked at him as if measuring every move. But Otávio was persistent, not with speeches, with presence. He brought soup in a thermos, waited outside her prep course, sat on the sidewalk just to talk about nothing, until one day she smiled for real. "You really plan to stick around, huh? Now you're the one who'll have to put up with me, even if I snore, forget dates, and wear mismatched socks." She laughed, and for the first time he saw in her eyes trust. The following week, they scheduled the first ultrasound. Otávio wanted to be there. "If I miss the beginning of your life, at least let me witness the beginning of theirs," she agreed, a little hesitant, but she did. Cold room, smelling of alcohol and AC. The doctor was kind, soft-voiced. She spread the gel on Isadora's belly, placed the probe, looked at the screen. Silence. Isadora stared at the ceiling, nervous. Otávio, holding her hand, gripped it tight without realizing. "Is everything okay?" she asked. The doctor didn't answer right away. The image wasn't coming in clearly. The sound of a heartbeat wasn't there. "Doctor," the doctor sighed, turned slowly. "I'm so sorry, but the fetus has no more cardiac activity." The world stopped. Otávio didn't understand at first. Isadora froze. "No, that can't be. I felt it. I saw my belly changing." "I know. It happens. More often than you'd think. But the little heart has stopped." The doctor removed the probe, wiped off the gel. She explained the procedure, spoke about retention, curettage, estimated date, but none of it made sense. Otávio looked at his daughter, now curled up, motionless, staring into nothing. "Dad," she whispered, voice cracking, "he died inside me." Otávio squeezed her hand, strong, steady, but inside the ground had collapsed. It felt like life had given him a gift and snatched it away before he could even unwrap it. They got home without saying a word. Isadora locked herself in her room, and inside cried the way only a mother who loses a child she never met can cry. Otávio sat outside, in the hallway, not knowing what to do, not knowing what to say, until he pulled out the blue ribbon he'd taken from the cemetery, slid it under her door, and wrote on a note, "Maybe he didn't come to live, but to help you be born again, and help me live for real, for the first time." Inside she read it, and cried more. But the tears now came with less pain. They came with acceptance. Because even what leaves too soon leaves a trace. The next day, Isadora came out of her room, pale, weak, but standing. She looked at her father and said, "Let's rebuild the foundation, not for the money, for the names they tried to erase." Otávio nodded, "Then let's." But what neither of them knew was that Claudio was already on the move, and the final blow was in progress. In the next chapter, the attack comes from where no one expected, and Isadora's name will hit the headlines, with a lie big enough to ruin everything. It was just another morning, but Otávio's phone wouldn't stop ringing. Calls, alerts, messages. But it wasn't family, wasn't friends. It was journalists, reporters, people looking for blood. The day before, an anonymous article had gone live on a local digital news site, with a headline like a punch to the gut. "Unknown daughter of millionaire businessman accused of fraud and attempted extortion." The article claimed Isadora had tried to use her supposed family connection to extort money from the Fontes Foundation, threatening legal action and stirring internal chaos. A blatant lie. But the damage was instant. On social media, her name became a target. In WhatsApp groups, the rumor spread like wildfire. Otávio got calls from worried partners, doubtful board members, even foundation staff suddenly looking at him sideways. He knew exactly who was behind it. Claudio and his allies were fighting dirty, very dirty. "It's a smear war," Otávio told Isadora, his voice tired but firm. "They want to destroy me before they even hear me," she answered, eyes swollen from crying. "But the truth will come out. It has to," he insisted. Isadora, however, wasn't alone. A few independent journalists started digging. A former college friend of hers, now a reporter, began collecting documents, testimonials, and evidence that dismantled every part of the false accusations. That lie had short legs. But the real blow still hadn't landed, because the Fontes Foundation wasn't just a pot of money. It was legacy, memory, power, and the people trying to control that wouldn't stop until they'd burned everything in their path. Meanwhile, Claudio moved in the shadows, sending lawyers, pushing board members, altering contracts behind closed doors, trying to squeeze out any resistance. But he didn't count on one thing: Otávio was back, and this time with his daughter, and together they were a force too loud to ignore. In the next chapter, the rebuilding begins, brick by brick, but the journey will be long, and the heart will need to be stronger than ever. After the storm comes the calm, or at least the promise of it. Otávio and Isadora spent weeks putting things back in order, not just in spreadsheets or boardrooms, but in their own hearts, because this was no longer about money, no longer about inheritance. It was about justice, about rebuilding not just a foundation, but a family. The new office of the Fontes Foundation was different. Bright walls, open windows. The air smelled of strong coffee and hope. Isadora walked through the corridors, now lined with framed black and white photos. Photos of Lucia, of Teresa, of the true story written in silence, tears and courage. "I never thought I'd be here, fighting for what's rightfully mine," she said, voice steady. "But you're not alone anymore," Otávio replied, standing beside her. "Now this foundation belongs to all of us." And it was true. One by one, employees returned, partners came back. Even the press, the honest ones, started telling the real story. It was a new beginning, not without scars, but real. Because rebuilding a legacy after decades of lies is slow, but not impossible, especially when it's built on truth. And somewhere across the city, someone was watching, someone who still had debts to collect, but who was starting to realize the game had changed. And that old man, Otávio, with that young woman by his side, they weren't going to give up. Not now, not ever. You know, my dear, there are some things in life we just can't understand in the moment. There's pain that feels like punishment. There's silence that turns into a prison. But there's also something else, the bridge, that invisible bridge connecting the past to the future, and that we can only cross when we finally lower our guard. Otávio and Isadora began to build that bridge together, one slow step at a time, with mistakes, with doubts, but also with courage. Because family, my dear, isn't just about who you're born from. It's about who stays. One hot summer afternoon, sitting on the porch of the mansion that was finally beginning to feel like home, Otávio let out one of those phrases only old folks know how to say. They say if you go looking, you'll find, but no one tells you that what you find might be worse than what you lost. Isadora smiled. But it can also be better, can't it? He nodded. Some people are born invisible, but they weren't born to live erased. They sat in silence, looking out at the horizon. The sun was setting slowly, painting the sky orange and purple, and in that moment, the past seemed to finally rest. Because in the end, we learned that the greatest legacy isn't wealth. It's truth, it's love, it's the courage to begin again. And most of all, it's knowing that even when a story is full of shadows, there's always a crack where light can shine through. And me, I'm your Grandpa Rico, and I sit here thinking, what's the story you carry? What secrets, what choices, what strength? Because in the end, my dear, we don't choose the story we're born into, but we choose what we do with it. And Otávio and Isadora chose to be bigger than the pain, stronger than the silence, more alive than the lie. So that's what I leave you with today. It doesn't matter how many doors close, how many truths try to stay hidden. The light of truth is stubborn. It finds cracks, it bursts through windows, it rebuilds what was broken. If this story moved something in you, leave a comment. Tell me what this reunion awakened inside you. Drop a like to help the channel grow, and hit that subscribe button, because there are many more powerful stories on the way. Until next time, from your friend, Grandpa Rico.